I now give the floor to the representative of Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on this month of each year, Western countries among the permanent members of the Security Council issue and reiterate misleading statements promoting a false narrative on the terrorist war that my country, Syria, has been witnessing throughout the years. These statements aim at covering up the practices of these same states in terms of acts of aggression, occupation, and economic blockade, in view of destabilizing the stability and security of Syria, to undermine our developmental achievements, and to prejudice our national choices and weaken our regional role to serve the Israeli occupation. My delegation will not delve into the content of these statements. They indeed include allegations and claims that are unfounded and baseless. The fact that the countries issuing those statements persist in their destructive policies and persist in their unrealistic illusions have denied them any credibility. The positions of these states vis-à-vis the crimes of genocide that the Israeli occupation persists in committing against the Palestinian people for 6 months now is yet another proof to the falseness of their lies and allegations, and is a proof of their blind bias towards the Israeli occupation. This support and this bias has emboldened the occupation authorities to pursue their repeated aggressions against Syrian territories, the last of which were the aggressions against rural Damascus on the 17th and 19th of the current month. In this context, Syria reaffirms the content of the letters it has sent to the Secretary General and to the President of the Security Council, asking them to immediately intervene to put an end to the hysterical Israeli aggressions and prevent their recurrence. My country, Syria, warns the Israeli occupation authorities against the consequences of their criminal actions, which jeopardize regional and international peace and security. Mr. President, contrary to the claims of some Western states, the Syrian government has adopted an array of measures and steps aiming at promoting stability and security and at meeting the needs of the Syrians all over the country, in addition to providing the enabling conditions for the dignified return of the refugees to their regions. However, these Western states, as we have seen and heard today from the statements of the 3 Western permanent members of the Security Council, these Western states prefer to turn a deaf ear and a blind eye, ignoring the commendable steps adopted by the Syrian government, especially that these measures were taken in unusual circumstances to face the numerous challenges left by years of terrorist war and by acts of aggression, and left by the illegitimate foreign military presence and the inhumane UCMs imposed on Syria. Mr. President, the Syrian government is committed to pursue its constructive cooperation with the United Nations and other partners in the humanitarian and developmental fields. My country remains hopeful that the United Nations will address the concerns that our delegation has repeatedly mentioned. Indeed, terrorist organizations are preventing the cross-line delivery of humanitarian assistance. These terrorist organizations are confiscating the cross-border humanitarian assistance, looting them, and diverting them, depriving civilians from this assistance. We have also mentioned our concern over the meetings between those responsible for the Gaziantep office and terrorist organizations and the illegal administrative structures affiliated to them. My country reaffirms the need to grant the UN agencies in Damascus full powers to discharge their mandate all over Syria in complete coordination and cooperation with the Syrian government, and to end the unusual circumstances imposed by conditions that are valid no more. Syria also calls for an immediate and unconditional lifting of UCMs. We call for putting an end to the policies of blockade and collective punishment of peoples adopted by the successive American administrations and by the EU in a violation of the Charter's principles, particularly the principles of sovereignty and equality between states. Syria reaffirms that we refuse linking humanitarian funding to political conditions and we refuse being imposed any conditions at the expense of the Syrian people, its security and prosperity. Mr. President, mines and explosive devices planted by terrorist organizations in Syria are still claiming yearly the lives of hundreds of Syrians, injuring and maiming many others. Therefore, we call again for increasing and intensifying the UNMA's activities in Syria and to provide the necessary funding and support to overcome the awareness campaign that we are launching now and to decontaminate the Syrian territories from these mines. In this context, my delegation expresses its thanks and appreciation to the support provided by Russia and Armenia, as well as other international and non-governmental organizations to decontaminate several locations. Mr. President, the Syrian Minister of Foreign Affairs met with Special Envoy Pedersen in Damascus days ago. He reiterated that Syria is keen on cooperating with him, and he reaffirmed the commitment of Syria to a Syrian-Syrian dialogue that should be Syrian-led, Syrian-owned, without any external interference. He also welcomed the next meeting of the Constitutional Committee in a venue that should be agreed upon among the Syrians. In this context, I would like to remind that Syria had submitted to the Special Envoy a constructive proposal that would allow for the convening of the 9th session of the Constitutional Committee. We call upon the Special Envoy to pursue his efforts in line with this proposal to allow the committee to resume its work without any further delay. My delegation reaffirms that the principle that we reiterate at the beginning of all Security Council resolutions pertaining to Syria is full commitment to the sovereignty of the Syrian Arab Republic, its independence, unity, and territorial integrity. Enforcing this principle means that Western permanent members of the Security Council should refrain from their aggressive policies, which only brought Syria and the region terrorism and destruction. This principle also requires ending the foreign illegitimate military presence on Syrian territories and putting an end to all violations and to the plundering of national resources, sponsoring of terrorist organizations and separatist militias, and ending the support for trans-border infiltrations, the last of which was the visit of the French envoy Fabrice de Blich and General Michael Corella to Syria. In conclusion, Mr. President, some Western countries pretend to want the interest of Syria and its people and to aim for the stability and security of the region. Therefore, they should change their obsolete approach and they should refrain from their false narrative and they should adopt diplomacy and dialogue. They should support the efforts of the Syrian state aiming at improving the humanitarian and livelihood situation of the Syrians and to restore the rule of law on all the Syrian territories. They should also help us fight terrorist organizations and put an end to the crimes perpetrated by terrorist organizations, including trafficking in artifacts and drugs. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Syrian Arab Republic.